here comes Dr. David Anderson. Doctor, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Art.
Where are you, roughly?
We're located on Long Island, New York.
Long Island, New York?
That is correct, yes.
Way back there. All right. Doctor, I must tell you, time travel is probably the most interesting, romantic notion and pursuit that I have. All my life I have contemplated its possibility, and so we're going to have a lot in common, I feel. How did you pray tell, with all your formal education, get involved in something so on the edge?
Well, it's amazing. I think to you and us today it's on the edge, but I think within the next 5 to 10 to 15 years we're going to see a lot of common applications of time control theory and technology in our daily lives. Where I initially began, though, was when I was young, I always had an interest in mathematics and physics. And as you mentioned earlier, I did spend about 5 years doing research and development at the Flight Test Center, the Air Force Flight Test Center in the Mojave Desert. There I got involved in space-time research. And I think the enlightening day for me was we were trying to solve a problem with some of our satellite systems. We had an unexplained variance in our satellite positions where they were drifting so much every year. And I was assigned to the project. We solved the problem. And about 2 years later, after solving the problem, I went back and I looked at the numbers, and what fell out of that was a lot of new models with regards to space-time and its ties to magnetism and energy.
Okay, slow down. So you had an anomaly in one satellite or a constellation of satellites?
No, it was basically a number of different space-based satellite systems. They were drifting. Each year, we predicted, and we had many models available to us where we thought the satellites would be.
Should be.
Could be, yes.
Based on all kinds of factors, gravity, the orbit, a million different factors, I suppose, huh?
Absolutely. But what was the confusing issue to everybody was the satellites were not where they were predicted to be. And it turned out, and the bottom line was that it was due to the results of what's called frame dragging, a prediction that comes out of Einstein's general theory of relativity.
Frame dragging?
Yes.
What is that?
Well, frame dragging is a phenomenon predicted by general relativity that talks about how a spinning mass, like the Earth or the Moon, actually will drag space and time around it slightly to a very small degree.
I understand exactly what you're saying. The rotation itself is actually causing time and space itself to be slightly perturbed. Is that?
That is correct. That's a good explanation. Yes.
Wow. The implications of that, then.
Well, I think the implications that came out of that, Art, was that it wasn't so much that we solved the problem. What we realized, we came up with a new mathematical model that not only corrected the satellite predictions and where they should be, but it also illustrated to us some new relationships that existed between space and time and energy and electromagnetic fields. I guess a coupling of those different technologies that weren't apparent before. And from that coupling, that's when my passion, I think, it was always a passion, but like you, I think from that point, it really became an obsession.
Okay. But you did all this for, as you point out, the very prestigious Air Force Flight Test Center. When you explained to the powers that be what you had discovered, how did they handle that? Because you were telling them something entirely new in science, and I wouldn't think they'd take that real well.
Well, you're absolutely right. Sometimes different establishments that were in place are a little slow to hear new ideas, but it really wasn't the case there. Initially, as I mentioned, the problem was solved with a mathematical model. And at the time when we solved the problem, we were very pleased. We were very happy. We had a new, reliable system to predict, where our satellites would be.
And ultimately, I suppose that's all they, bottom line, cared about. They wanted a predictable model.
That's correct. And I did not even recognize what I was holding in my hand until 2 years later. And at that point, I was just on my way to leave the Air Force, and I decided that I would pursue that research on my own after the fact.
And so where did you, you're back in private life, where did you take that research from that point? Or how did you proceed from that point?
Well, I spent probably a good part of, I would say, 8 to 10 years doing nothing but trying to refine that mathematical model, doing a lot of different research, a lot of different development. And I think the biggest milestone for me was I finally reached a point, I think in the early 1990s, where I realized that some types of time control technology were achievable today, And at that point, I began to fund and launch the Time Travel Research Center in 1995.
Okay, you keep saying time control technology. Define for me what you mean by that.
Time control is interesting because anytime you tell somebody you're working in space-time physics, the first thing they always joke about is, so your mission is to build a time machine. And I won't deny that that's a key focus and a passion for all of us here. But the initial application of our technology will be not for sending somebody through space and time. It'll be more for applications in everyday life. One of our key focus areas is in medical applications. Or
as they said in a recent great movie, baby steps.
Exactly.
So what application of control of time can you imagine early on?
Well, early on, I think two of our most high interest areas right now, where we receive most of our funding and most of our focus, is in two areas. The first is the medical industry, and the second is an industrial process application. And the medical industry is actually our short-term focus is the development of the capability to use this technology for organ preservation, to help store and preserve organs while they're awaiting transplant. Now, the medical industry and the communities that we're working with right now, they really see that as a stepping stone. What they really want to see our time warp field technology used for is for eventually medical stasis fields that will help slow or stop the progression of disease, and eventually
Okay, wait. You're already ahead of me. Let's back up to organs for just a second. If you apply time control technology to the preservation of organs, does that mean, for example, that somebody who has a head trauma and dies, whose organs are going to be used for transplantation, in some manner or another, you would apply time technology to keep the organs fresh?
Yes, that may be the best thing to do, Art, would just be explain a little bit about what our time warp field technology is.
Okay, in a way we can digest, I hope.
Yeah, absolutely. Essentially, our time warp field technology allows us to create today what we call a small self-contained time warp field. The field size that we work with, it's about a 30 to 40 centimeter diameter field. So it's a spherical field. Within that field, we are able to adjust to a small degree the rate at which time passes relative to the time rate outside of the field.
Wow.
So an object inside of that field will experience a slightly accelerated or slightly retarded time rate relative to anything outside. So by placing an organ that's awaiting transplant inside of that field, we can actually slow down the rate at which time passes for that organ, making it preserving it much longer.
Absolutely fresh organs.
Absolutely.
But you're really, people need to know you're deadly serious about this. You say you can create a 30 to 40 centimeter. How big is that?
That would be roughly about 10 to 12 inches today.
10 to 12 inch area where time is either going faster or slowing down. Is it a cumulative process, Doctor? In other words, the longer something remains within this field, the longer the progression or regression in time?
Absolutely. Typically what we do is once we establish the field and we place an object or test instrumentation inside of the field, and we adjust the time rate. That time rate, they say it's 50% of the rate at which time passes outside of the field.
Holy smokes! Really?
That is correct. Yes.
You're telling me you've really done this?
Absolutely. I'm not saying that we're not without problems, but we have made some great steps and achievements, especially last year. Last year was a very successful year for us early on.
Good Lord, Doctor! Do you realize what you're telling everybody here tonight?
I realize what we're telling everybody. I will tell everybody, though, also that as much as we've seen some great success, there are also many challenges that we face as well. So I think in many times, as much as we've had success, there are probably more questions now than we have answers for.
Let me begin, and I guess there will be some proprietary information you can't give me, but how would such a field be created? Can you give me any broad outline?
Well, there is some proprietary information I cannot provide, but to give you a rough outline, creating the field, I'd say, would pretty much happen in a three-step process. First, we use an antenna configuration that introduces a high-speed rotational magnetic field in the core area of the field.
Bingo.
Okay,
I had a feeling it was going to be that.
Well, actually, believe it or not, that's probably not the most important element. It's important. We found out from a stability standpoint it's important. But then we use an ejector system that establishes what I'll just say is a necessary core environment, and that's the key element there is the injection of a gas reagent. The third step is that we use a high-energy laser array to introduce and then to induce and then modulate the field. And this is, I guess I'll say for some of the scientists out there, this is similar, not identical, but similar to what's done in high-energy plasma physics.
Well, let me tell you what's blowing me away about this, all right?
Sure.
I don't know whether you are familiar with the story of the Philadelphia experiment.
Of course I am, absolutely. I share the same passion with you.
Okay. Well, I've interviewed a number of people who claim involvement in that. And the technical description that they gave, Doctor, of the equipment that was used in that experiment, which really was a radar evasion experiment more than it was time travel or invisibility or anything like that. But they used rotating fields, magnetic fields, and RF as well, rotating RF fields. I'm trying to remember the exact configuration and power amounts. But are you familiar with the story vaguely?
Yes, I am. As a matter of fact, I know what they did is that they were trying to degauss the ship so it couldn't be detected by mines, so they were using magnetic coils around the ship
That's right.
with high-energy magnetic fields. What I would say, there is a big difference between what we're doing and there.
But also, as I heard you describe what created the field, the alarm bells were going off saying, ding, 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 that sounds somewhat similar.
Yeah, sometimes I wish I didn't have to say those four words, but it is an important part. What we found out was when we induce a field, the most important part is establishing the right core environment, getting the gas reagent distributed properly, and then firing our laser ray into the field. And like I said, it's very, very similar to high-energy plasma experimentation. We found out, though, that the rotational magnetic field helped us solve some stability problems. It's a key component, but it's not a driving element.
Holy smokes. Well, excuse me, but this is going to be breaking news for a lot of people, Doctor. I mean, that we can even do this. It's certainly news for me, and I didn't expect you to tell me this tonight. I thought you would be a theoretical research group only, not actually involved in the hardware. And so what you're saying tonight is a total blowaway for a lot of people. You understand that?
Again, I understand that. And I guess I would let people know as well, as much as we have seen progress, like I said, we have many, many challenges. We see the benefit to the medical community. The organ preservation experimentation that we're doing right now, that's a stepping stone. Like I said, the medical community has their eye on the possibility of eventually stasis field and disease regression.
Sure.
The other area, Art, where a lot of people are expressing interest and even funding our research to a certain degree is for industrial process acceleration. And when I say that is, there are many scientific and industrial processes that take a tremendous amount of time to complete.
Right.
And the ability to accelerate certain test processes or industrial process or chemical reaction
would have obvious, tremendous economic value.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. For us, it's kind of interesting. Our biggest, from our heart, our biggest area is to see the application of this in the medical applications, because we see it offering a tremendous, not only a brand new field of technology, but a tremendous benefit for people around the world.
Well, of course it would be. It would be, Mr. Anderson's one step for mankind. Neil Armstrong's one step, you're Anderson, for mankind. A giant leap for mankind is what it would be, to be able to preserve organs with actual time. Time travel might not be the right phrase for it, huh?
That's why I carefully use the word time control technology. Like I said, we all here have a passion that someday we might be able to build that great machine of fiction. But for now, we see the short-term applications being very, very different.
If you look 50 years, 100 years ahead, if you project your research out 100 years, could there be a time machine?
I think the answer to that is yes, or I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing.
Well, I have a lot.
Art, the one thing I would say is one thing we have not done. We did early last year. We had demonstrated our time rate acceleration retardation using mechanical and electrical clocks.
Yes.
But we were always hesitant to use it on a living organism.
All right.
What we did last year.
Hold that. It's a great place to hang everybody up, including me. I want to hear this. Stay right where you are. All right, back now to Dr. Anderson, Dr. David Anderson, and I must tell you that obviously many of you are going to want to read more. On my website right now is a link to Dr. David Anderson's website, which is www.time-travel.com. So if you'll go to my website and just click on that link, you can do a lot more reading about what you're hearing about right now. Would that be accurate, Doctor?
That would be very accurate.
Good. All right. Now, obviously, you experimented first in this field you created with inanimate objects of some sort.
That is correct. Our test instrumentation we use mechanical, both mechanical and electronic clocks and other types of test instrumentation.
Clocks.
And up until earlier last year, we really avoided doing any testing on living organisms, at least early on.
Up until last year.
That is correct.
If you took a normal clock, a wound clock that was accurate, and you put it in the field, what could you prove, or what could you?
What you would have would be a perfect demonstration, which we've done over and over again, of showing how the time rate acceleration happens. We place one clock within the field and then one clock outside of the field as a reference clock, and then
Sure.
we can show the divergence as the field is adjusted.
And how much divergence have you demonstrated?
Oh, actually, it's very specific. We've been able, again, we use the term reference time rate. That's the time rate, the rate at which time passes outside of the field.
Right.
Within the field, we've been able to go up to 300%, an acceleration factor of 3 over the reference time rate. And inside the field, we've been able to stably go down to about 13.2% of the time rate, actually slowing the rate at which time passes.
Holy smokes.
And we've even gone below that, but when we go below that, we do run into some, I guess I'll say, not stability problems, maybe a easy way to put it.
Stability problems.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons why we really haven't tested.
How would a stability problem manifest?
Well, let's see. I'm trying to think of a real succinct way to put this. We have, when we create a field, there's obviously a time rate outside of the field and a time rate inside the field, and there's a variance. And inside what we call the boundary layer, which you can picture as like a thin shell, like an eggshell, around that spherical field.
Right.
That shell area, or the boundary layer, is where the time rate actually changes, and it has a peculiar effect of Dopplering frequencies and energy. So what happens is that if we have certain types of energy inside or outside of the field, heat can be Dopplered up to light. Light can be Dopplered up to other things. Higher temperatures could be, and light could be Dopplered up to gamma radiation. And what happens is, when I said the stability problem,
yeah.
our shell boundary layer is a very thin shell. The word shell is very applicable, all the way from 300% down to about 13.2%. What happens as we try to get closer and closer to the zero time rate, and when we pass through it, that shell actually expands. It becomes thicker, and that Doppling effect carries all the way through almost to the center of the core. And when we did our first test last year on plant seedlings, our first test on living organisms, we actually ended up cooking about 80% of the plant seedlings that were inside the field.
Did you say cooking them?
Yeah, literally.
With regard to inanimate objects, just backing up for a second,
Sure.
if you are you able to actually observe the object within the field?
Yes, we are. Actually, a question we get asked a lot. Our first projects, we call it Project Dark Star. That's the study of our time warp field technology. And yes, we can see objects in the field. As we accelerate the time rate, it actually, frequencies get Doppler down, moving from inside the field to outside. So you actually see a darkening and a more of an opaqueness to the object as we accelerate it. As we reduce it, you see the reverse. But yes, we can observe.
That's amazing. That's amazing. That's like magic. To a lot of us who had no idea such a thing was going on, it's like magic. So the inanimate object begins to darken down.
Yeah, and it's not the object itself. It's really just the Doppling effect, again, that we see within the boundary layer of the field.
In other words, optically, how it's appearing to us because of what it's being subjected to?
Yeah, basically, every color has a frequency, and as the light or that color moves outward through the field when we're accelerating time, that frequency is actually dropped or down, so colors will actually shift in shades when we're accelerating slowly, and it gets more dramatic as we increase the time rate divergence.
Oh. Now, you mentioned seeds, and I can understand that as a very early biological experiment. But what about what in that field or the creation of the field would be cooking the seeds?
Well, again, what happens is to maintain the field, as I mentioned, there were 3 steps in implementing a field. The third one was inducing the field with the reagent with a high-energy laser array. We have lasers, and that after a field is induced, the lasers still fire at a certain pattern. When they do, they're inducing energy into the boundary layer of the field. That energy, again, if we're retarding time, is Dopplered up, which takes it up to, depending on the degree which we're trying to retard time, it'll actually Doppler that up to more harmful radiation. So when I say cook, I'm not necessarily saying heat.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Radiation.
Is the laser the modulating agent?
The laser is used. We need a certain amount of energy in the field to maintain it, and that's what the lasers are used to do. Our first model of our time warp field generator included 3 lasers and one, we call it an injector sensor array. Our current model we're using right now has 12 lasers and 6 injector sensor arrays on it. So we actually have 12 lasers that are used to maintain and modulate the field.
To create such a field, Doctor, do you have any concerns about safety? Has that occurred to you as you've been moving through this incredible experimentation that I think nobody knew about until now?
Well, the answer is yes. You mentioned early on baby steps, and that's something that's actually very important to us. A lot of people ask us, why haven't we tested this on animals or people yet? And there's 2 reasons. The first one is the field size is too small, but more importantly, this Doppler effect, or this boundary layer problem where it Dopplers energies and frequencies, literally can have very damaging effects on living tissue. And we know...
So you might end up cooking a mouse, for example.
Exactly, or radiating the mouse is maybe a better way to put it. But we know we can solve this problem. And when we solve this problem, the impact this technology could have on research, finding cures for diseases like heart disease, cancers, diabetes, and AIDS is absolutely profound. And eventually, when we can use this on a living person, the science fiction days of stasis fields or disease regression fields might not be science fiction anymore.
What do you believe stands between you and the ability to subject biological entities to this? In other words, in the manner that you now create the field, there's going to have to be a whole new manner of the creation of that field to avoid the effect on biological organisms, isn't there?
Yeah, that's correct. The first issue is understanding the boundary layer better. And I got to tell you, we've had great successes in the last 2 years. And we're making some great results. But when it comes to the boundary layer and understanding it, which is very important to us, we must understand it better. We have more questions than we have answers.
Sure.
But to give you an example, when we had our 3-laser system compared to today, we had to inject about, I think it was close to, I can't remember exactly now, it was about 20 to 25 times more power to induce and maintain the field. As we've learned more about the boundary layer, we've now cut that back by a factor of 20 to 25. So as we bring that energy down, and that's actually the biggest achievement here, is to be able to create a time warp field with a lower amount of energy. As we bring that energy down, it's going to help solve the problem.
Kind of like cold fusion trying to get to room temperature.
Yeah, I guess I never looked at it quite that way, but I guess you could say that, certainly. There's some analogy there.
Whew, this is so much to digest. When I asked about safety, when you create a time warp field, is there any danger? It's kind of like when they drop the atomic bomb. They first, many credentialed scientists thought it might ignite the entire atmosphere and there might be a chain reaction, our atmosphere would burn up. They didn't know when they pushed the button. They really didn't know. So when you create a field like that, was there any concern as you approached throwing that first switch that something totally unexpected might occur that could be dangerous?
I think that feeling grows every day. Not that we've had any major problems. We have a lot of respect for what we do. Respect for the technology and the risk. I mean, we run this like a a full-blown flight test almost. I mean, our pre-test, I'll give you an example. Our typical live experiments run maybe about 2 to 3 hours. The pre-planning and the effort and the pre-experiment preparation runs about 2 to 3 days, and the post-experiment analysis cycle and the modification for the next test plan can run a week or two. So to give you an idea, that gives you a little bit of proportion. We have a lot of respect for it.
Without getting specific, Doctor, because you may not want to, I don't know. What you mentioned funding. Obviously, the kind of work you're doing requires a lot of money. Where does the money come from? What kind of sources?
Well, early on, I had to fund a lot of my own research. Now, the funding, and I think it's no secret, we get funding from both private investors as well as some agencies in the government have interests in what we're doing. But to be honest with you, the largest part of our funding and interest, it comes from really two areas. If I had to give you the top two, one, it would be from the medical community because they see the long-term possibility, and they also have a lot of money to invest every year. The second area, outside of that, I'm trying to think. It's almost a toss-up, but we do have some interest from the government. But I'd say number one, it really is the medical community, and then there's some people with regards to industrial process and research or scientific test acceleration.
With regard to any funding that might be coming from the government, an obvious question: what application do they appear to be interested in?
Well, I really can't talk a lot about specifics.
Okay, I'll read right between that line, no problem, because I think I know the answer to it.
What I can say is that that's what a lot, actually, believe it or not, the one thing I can say is that a lot of people hear the name Project Darkstar, which is the name we gave our initial project to explore time warp field technology. And a lot of people think that it sounds very sinister, like a military weapons program. Actually, it was only because of the Doppler effect in the boundary layer and what we saw visually.
In other words, you didn't really name this project Project Darkstar until you made the observation of the field change.
That is correct. And I tell you, to sit here and observe this thing, it's absolutely amazing. You said it before, is that when you see something like this work, we all know that gravity and time can warp space and time, that time is not an absolute. This is all science fact. It's not science fiction. But to see it actually in action at this scale is absolutely fascinating.
Mind-boggling, actually.
It is, and I think what's interesting is I think we don't even get, after the amount of time I've spent on this, I never lose my fascination and wonder when I see us open up a field and start adjusting time rates. But the people who see this field in operation, Art, the most interesting thing is they always call me back in a month, 3 to 4 weeks, and they say, I can't look at the world the same way. I said, they knew in their back of the mind that time and space were not an absolute and that time is mutable. And, but when you walk down the street anymore, you know, you don't...
I understand that. How could you look at the world, everything, in the same way at all, ever again, once you had observed that?
Well, you know, it's amazing. Sometimes you have to ask the opposite question, and I'd say to your listeners, how can you not look at it? We know. I mean, the fact that time is mutable and can be dilated and that we live in a universe that's made up of a dynamic web of energy, this is the fabric of the universe and the world we live in. But sometimes we tend to shrink the size of the magic and all the wonder in the world to the size of our daily routine and material possessions. You know, we have a cultural and biological evolution that we've been through that lets us look at time in one specific way.
Let me rip you back to the reality or the myth of the Philadelphia experiment. Do you think, Doctor, that there really was such an experiment? The reports of its effects may have been overblown, or maybe they were right because they talked about some pretty horrible injuries that occurred. Is that possible in your way of thinking?
Oh, wow. That's such a hard question because there's so much information on the subject out there. It's hard to know what was real, what wasn't. And unfortunately, I wasn't there, Art. I wish I could.
I hear you, but I'm saying, based on what you know now about what you have done, if they had been doing what was described at that time, is it possible they would have done great biologic injury to, the volunteers?
I think, again, the technology that we're using is drastically different. But I think the answer to that is yes. I think you're pretty familiar with the dangers of electromagnetic radiation. Was this due to a rip or tear in time, or was it due to the radiation effect?
Or a little of both.
A little of both.
I mean, you'd be cooking people with immense amounts of RF, rotating RF fields, as was described in that experiment. And so it could have been a little bit of both.
You know what's interesting, Art, is that is that, obviously my background includes, it's probably 20 years of math and science, and what's interesting is I just started opening up my mind about a year ago and doing more work studying the nature of time and philosophy, but we also run, and I'm not trying to plug here, but I think it would be helpful for your listeners, we have an organization called the Time Travel Research Association that's dedicated to studying the topics of time travel on any subject, from the Philadelphia experiment to the Montauk Project to philosophy to art to religion and all the ramifications. And I think when you ask me the question, do I believe, I'll just tell you I'm not going to say I don't believe, because as I've studied more and more outside of the rigid walls of math and physics that I've grown up in and lived all my life in, I realize that there's much to be learned there.
Is it just coincidence, Doctor, that you're on Long Island?
I can anticipate where you're going with regards to the story of the Philadelphia experiment and the Phoenix Project being moved to Montauk.
That's right.
Is it a coincidence? Consciously, it is a total coincidence. Who knows subconsciously? Maybe there's a master plan or a path for me somewhere in the universe that led me to Long Island near Montauk. But consciously,
I mean, that must have entered your mind.
You know what? And yes, people ask me the question all the time. Actually, the Time Travel Research Center, when it was founded in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, and we still run one small office there.
Maybe so, but you're in Long Island.
And now we're in Long Island, yes. Our base of operations is out here.
David Anderson, the man you're listening to right now, is a former U.S. Air Force officer, flight test engineer, and scientist. He developed a passion for space-time study while conducting research at the prestigious Air Force Flight Test Center, where he found cured an anomaly in satellites being not where they ought to be, and that led to all the time study. For the last 20 years since, he's been formulating and developing his breakthrough concepts in space-time physics and the study of time. His work led to the development of what is today called time-warped field theory. His research holds the first promise for the development and application of practical time control technology. In 1995, Dr. Anderson founded the Time Travel Research Center, today the world's most advanced research lab dedicated exclusively to the study and development of time control technology and its application in Long Island. His company also sponsors an organization called the Time Travel Research Association that networks time travel information and interests from more than 80 countries around the world. Here he is again. Doctor, welcome back.
Thank you.
All right. I think it's worth a minute to take some time to ask you about the nature of time, or what you believe with your research you understand, if anything at all, about the nature of time itself.
Oh, Art, I love this question.
Good.
Well, I think the best way to start with that question is to say that probably for about 2,000 years people have been asking it and have offered many answers, and I don't think I can improve on that. But I think one of the most important things that I always point out is that time is, to many of us, a very strange and curious thing. And one of the tests I'd encourage your listeners to do, if they haven't done it already, walk up to a friend or a family member or a stranger on the street and ask them, do you know what time is? And they'll all nod their head like, absolutely, yes, they do. Mm-hmm. And they're almost sure to answer yes. But when they do and you ask them to explain it, they'll never have an answer for you. They cannot find the words to explain what time is. And what's interesting is, even as far back as the 4th century, St. Augustine even said it differently. He said, what then is time? If no one asks me, I know. If I wish to explain it to one that asketh, I know not. And it tells you it's a very deep insight into what the psychology of time really is. I think also, sometimes I think maybe after 2,000 years we don't seem to have a good definition for time.
No.
Maybe perhaps we don't want to understand it. A lot of times people talk about time with a negative connotation because maybe it's linked to our own mortality.
Sure, it's our enemy ultimately, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, my favorite quote that captures that whole meaning is from Star Trek Generations, time is the fire in which we burn. And the other one is, time is a great teacher, but unfortunately it kills all its pupils. I feel that way sometimes.
But it may not necessarily always be so.
I think that is correct. I think that is correct, or I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. I think, this is actually an interesting area for me, and I'll talk about it too much, Art, so you have to reel me in. But,
no, go.
A lot of times we feel that time exists independent of us. But honestly, perhaps this belief is really just an illusion, and time is really something that is measured and perhaps created in our mind and our body's perceptions. Maybe time doesn't really exist. Maybe time is really measured in the mind.
It is, after all. It is our invention, in a sense, isn't it? It's just a perception. In other words, objects move. We measure that movement, the stars, the planets, and therefore we know that it takes time, X number of, we can measure units of something or another for an orbit, say.
Yes.
But really, that really may be our invention.
That may be our invention. That's exactly right. If you look at physiological, biological time, maybe it's the impression it leaves on the mind. I mean, our mind expects the future, which then becomes the present. When it becomes the present, our mind attends to us, and then it becomes the past, which we remember. And maybe that future and past doesn't really exist. I think what's even more interesting, Art, if you look at the world of quantum physics today, I have so many friends working in this field, and you look at what's coming out of the hard science, out of the particle accelerators and super colliders,
right.
It's more in line with the notions of time and space that were offered by the Hindus, the Buddhists, and the Taoists 2,000 years ago.
Well, I was going to ask, in other words, you're working on the hardware aspect of time manipulation.
That is correct.
Which is really fascinating to me, but there may be another way to manipulate time in the metaphysical arena, or do you sort of...
The answer to that question, I have an answer that I can't really back up well. Again, my whole life has been living in the world of mathematics and physics and living within the rigid walls, inside the walls of analytical science. But I personally believe that as we keep developing our time control technologies and the applications emerge and we look at true time travel or interdimensional travel, I think as much as we'll look at it with regards to technology and science in terms of hardware, I think at the same time we'll see great advances coming out of the study of the human mind and metaphysics and the power of the human mind.
Maybe so. But coming back to your hardware, if you put a clock in a time warp field, aren't there... In other words, what about this old thing of you cannot go back and meet yourself, or you would destroy yourself or something like that, or kill your grandfather, all these problems with potential time travel. On a smaller scale, wouldn't those problems also exist? In other words, if you've had a clock in a field and it's coming out of either the past or the future, in essence, when you bring it out of the field, doesn't it in essence collide with itself? Isn't there a potential problem there, or is there not? And if not, why not?
I don't believe in cause and effect or cause and consequence or whatever you want to say. I believe that cause and effect is dead. I think that that our world and the science of mathematics and physics now show that time travel to the future, time travel to the past, or time control technology is all real science. I think this notion of cause and effect is more along the lines of paradoxes. Like, for instance, it's nonsense to suggest that a moving object shrinks and gets heavier, or it's nonsense to suggest that an astronaut who travels to a distant star and returns will be younger than her twin brother she left behind. But it's not science fiction. It's science facts. And I think what we see here, Art, is really, these are sometimes what we call paradoxes, but I think these paradoxes are places where our rational minds really bump into their own limitations.
Well, I wouldn't see a paradox involved in, for example, an astronaut, as you point out, traveling, coming back, and relatively not having aged. Don't see a paradox there.
Correct.
But in creating a field, a time warp field, as you have done, I do see a potential paradox or effect of some kind. In other words, here we've got something rushing as you bring it back from the future or the past back into the present again.
Yes.
My mind can't wrap around that concept.
I think there's when we talk about the twin paradox or the astronaut traveling at high speeds. Okay, you're absolutely right. That's a time dilation in a forward direction. It's very simple to understand, and they're right. There's no way to go back into the past and change a cause and effect. But if you look at what Gödel did and Frank Tipler with regards to closed time-like curves and rotating cylinders, they have shown that travel to the past does not violate the laws of math and physics. It's reverse time travel again. Time travel to the past does
I'm not familiar with them. Please, what have they done?
Well, Gödel in the 1940s, it was a German mathematician. He came up with a concept of something called a closed time-like curve. And oh wow, this could be a very detailed conversation.
That's all right.
Essentially, it shows that there's a concept called a light cone that many of your listeners might be familiar with. It's a space-time diagram, and it shows that if you're an object, you must move forward in time, and if you move forward in time, you can't move at a faster speed than the speed of light. So for every place in space, there's what's called a light cone, where the forward faces in the future faces in one direction, and the past faces in another direction.
Okay.
However, the orientation of the future and the past, or space-time at every point of space, we live in a world, in a universe of curved space-time, can be different. So what Kurt Gödel showed, and he was the first person to present it, was that if you're in a curved space, when curved space could be created by heavy gravity, that light cone, if you followed a sequence of light cones that each pointed in a different direction, eventually they could loop back on yourself.
Heavy gravity as in really heavy gravity?
Very,
as in
heavy gravity.
Black hole, edge of black hole type gravity, right?
Not quite that magnitude,
no?
But very close, yes. And Frank Tipler took Kurt Gödel's work, and he expanded greatly on it, and he published a number of papers on what's called the Tipler cylinder, or the rotating cylinder. And it talks about a hypothetical cylinder large, infinitely long cylinder you could build in space, heavy enough mass, you rotate it, you could actually fly a ship along a specific path and go back into the past. And Art, what's most exciting about this, I'd encourage your listeners to read about it, is the first proof that shows that travel to the past does not violate the laws of math and physics.
Well, that would be like Star Trek. In other words, they travel in essence, hyperdimensional space along a specific path and achieved time travel to the past.
Yeah, I think in some ways, like, for instance, in some of those movies where they did the slingshot around the sun, using the heavy gravity of the sun, that's where they were trying to capture, some of the science behind it.
Well, we've done those kind of slingshot things with some of our satellites to attain speeds to get outside, around Jupiter. There's plenty of gravity there, for example.
Certainly.
I think we've been slingshotting things that way for some time.
Oh,
so
we see from satellites, Art, we see time dilation every day. When we have satellites that are on the opposite side of the sun from Earth, we can actually measure the time dilation due to gravity. We see the delays in the signals coming from the satellite due to the gravity of the sun. These are all, again, it's all science fact.
Doppler effect.
In that case, it's more of a it's a byproduct of Einstein's general relativity, that heavy gravity curves space-time, so the signal travels a longer path or a shorter path.
Well, a spacecraft way the hell out there should be able to get a signal back here at the speed of light. And are you suggesting to me that either it's getting here faster or slower as a result of the gravitational fields that it encounters on the way?
Absolutely. This is measured. This has been measured. I mean, this has been measured. I won't say dozens, hundreds of times.
Well, then aren't they sitting there scratching their heads, saying, "What the hell's going on?"
Oh, no. Actually, in this case, when you talk about the effect of general relativity on a small scale, dilating a signal so it comes back 2 seconds or a couple hundred milliseconds later than it should because it's passing nearby the sun.
Right.
That's a minor thing. It's relatively insignificant. But when you talk about increasing that to the point where, Frank Tipler's model took it, where you're close enough to heavy gravity for a long enough time, you literally can do it. And what's interesting, Art, nobody in the world, no physicist, no mathematician, since Frank Tipler published his paper in 1965, can disprove it. And, it's a great place. If somebody wants to study some of the fundamentals of time travel to the past, start with the work done by Frank Tipler.
Rotating.
Yeah, actually, the name of his paper, you can find it. You can find some information on our website under Tipler cylinders or rotating cylinders.
Tipler cylinders. What specifically were they physically?
His was a theoretical model of a large, massive spinning cylinder. Yes. And actually, we have
You know what that reminds me of? I'm sure there's no way in the world you miss seeing the movie Contact.
No, I did see it. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Good. Do you remember the giant machine?
Yes.
Do you remember the giant rotating cylinder? The rotations within rotations?
Yes, I remember that.
Did that seem really logical to you?
And believe it or not, there's a couple theories about time travel to the past. I'm going to answer your question a little bit roundabout. Is that one is using a Tipler cylinder, a rotating cylinder, you can accomplish reverse time travel. The other is with the possibility of a wormhole. One of the new ones put together by, I'm going to get his name wrong, Gödel from Princeton University, I forgot his first name,
right,
was something called cosmic strings.
String theory.
Well, a little bit different. The concept is with a rotating cylinder. There's this theoretical object in space that might be a remnant of the Big Bang called a hypothetical cosmic string. And if that was to pass by a spinning mass, it could create warp space-time or
Doctor,
like
holy smokes, hold it right there. We'll be right back. Doctor, very quickly, a couple of things have come in. A lot of faxes are just pouring in here. A couple of them say the following. De Palma, in the mid-'60s, put an FM receiver above a shielded rotating mass, and the received frequency was shifted radically. Now, is that time travel or space-time alteration? Rotation, rotation, rotation.
Yeah, it seems to be a common element, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Could you mention the name of the person who did the experiment again?
De Palma. And here's another one. He put a clock over a rotating mass, and that clock slowed down. Again, a rotating mass, angular momentum equals changing space-time constants.
Well, as I mentioned, I'm not familiar specifically with this. Now,
the name doesn't matter, but does the theory sound to you?
If the mass was extremely large, then the theory it's consistent with Einstein's general theory of relativity. If the mass is small, then there would need to be something else going on for that type of time dilation to occur,
okay.
Time variance to occur.
All right. Here's one. Hi, Art. I'm interested in time travel, but wonder how it can be determined that time warping is the real effect being achieved and not some other effect that simulates time travel. Can it absolutely be determined this is actual time acceleration or deceleration, for that matter?
Our experimentation is completely quantitative. Our reference imitation that we've used, like I said, we didn't do this just off of simply our test with plant seedlings. We've used plant seedlings and germination cycles. We've used electrical clocks. We've used mechanical clocks. And we've accumulated the data. We've done the test. And actually, that part of the testing is behind us. We have that part done. With how much trepidation do you approach the next volley of tests? Well, and what are they? The next volley of tests is to compete, is to continue to work on what we're doing with the tissue preservation. But the real big next step for us, Art, is to move into a living tissue or a live animal testing, which testing with animals or a living organism is a very controversial area. But even more so, we actually, a lot of people feel our experimentation into the study of time is blasphemy or is something that we shouldn't be doing. Well, I'm not sure of that myself. In other words, I do have questions. Since we don't, and we discussed this earlier, you freely admit we don't understand the nature of time, then we don't understand whether it's going to be, in essence, some sort of blasphemy, do we? I don't. That's a hard question. No, it's a wonderful question. Those are the best kind of questions, Art. Is that I don't feel it's blasphemous. I think the nature of time, again, and our lack of understanding it, is really, again, just a place where our mind is bumping into its own limitations. I mean, we live in a wonderful universe, a wonderful world filled with all kinds of magic, and we just don't see it and we don't understand it all the time. And that doesn't mean pursuing this is a wrong thing to do. Pursuing it with danger or risk to life would be a wrong thing to do. But pursuing time control technology and all the benefits that it's already showing us, and that, again, we hope to have this in everyday application within the next 5 to 10 years. So you really see nothing but good morality and ethics involved? Yeah, our biggest concern sometimes is could this technology be perverted or used for bad purposes? Well, here's another faxer, a great show. Please ask Dr. Anderson if his funding is by the government, and at what point during his time research and development would the government come in, take control of his work in the name of national security. Now, before you say, won't happen, remember when Tesla died, our government, in fact, rushed in, grabbed everything he had, including all the files and everything in his lab, and took it. And we still, to this very day, have not seen it. I don't know. As you know, I'm a patriot. I've spent a number of years as a scientist and engineer in the Air Force. Right. I'm very loyal to this country. I also keep one eye open. I don't know the answer to that. The government's interest in my work right now appears to be sincere and more of just a monitoring of the technology. I can't anticipate that. I'm not a naive person, but I like to think that that won't become an issue as long as we control the technology and the security well enough ourselves. Oh, I don't know.
There would be obvious. There would be obvious.
Showing.
There would be obvious military application, or they'd sure think of one.
Yeah.
And
eventually, yes, Art. I believe you're right. In another 5 to 10. I mean, right now, the everyday applications we're going to see first are harmless and totally beneficial in the area of medical and scientific testing. Could this technology, as it continues to advance, be perverted into something destructive or not for a good purpose? The answer is probably yes, but I'm not concerned about it right now because we're not at that point.
Well, I guess early on in the development of atomic energy, the primary goal was one of creating a bomb. You know, we weren't thinking of radiation for cancer cures, blunderbuss method as that may be. We were thinking about making a bomb to end a war.
Yes.
So you're not operating under that same kind of mandate and stress?
Not today, I'm not, no. And again, we monitor carefully. We obviously have a lot of security precautions in place. We protect our work. And again, even if somebody had access to all of our technology today, they would find it mostly, you know, all the testing we've done, really, the technology today couldn't be used for anything.
Is your research facility, nevertheless, highly secure?
It's, I can see it on nationwide radio. I'm going to say it's not secure. We're always looking for ways to improve it. We have a lot of precautions with regards to our facility, more importantly, our information and our systems. There's always ways to improve it, and you know what? We're always having attempted compromises. The last one was probably last week, so.
Compromises? You mean people trying to get your information?
Yeah, in this case, last week it was somebody trying to get information, trying to hack into our system, which was kind of a useless attempt, but it was attempted nonetheless.
Let me ask this, Doctor. If you're doing what you say you are doing in this country, then what are the Chinese doing? What are the Russians doing? What are the Swiss doing? What are the English doing? What's going on around the world? Do you have any sense at all of other parallel experimentation? Because that tends to occur with almost every new technology, parallel experimentation. What's going on elsewhere? Any hints?
Absolutely. First off, I'll tell all your listeners, if they're making a big mistake if they don't think that public investors, private investors, and governments all around the world are funding research in this area. Our government's doing it. It's a matter of public record.
Well, I didn't know that.
It's done under, I think back in the late 80s, as early as the late 80s, some of the investments started. They do it under the guise of labels like closed time-like curve research. Well, you know what a closed time-like curve is?
No, sir.
It's time travel to the past. it's retarding time travel to the past. That's exactly what it is. There's no other interpretation of it.
By what method?
Well, in this case, it was a theoretical funding that started back in the 80s by the U.S. government. It was funding of theoretical research. And this continues to go on. In the former Soviet Union, there were a number of projects in place. Those have kind of faded, mostly due to funding. There's still a few scientists there holding on. Dr. Novikov, who's the other person?
Yeah, they're pretty broke.
Yeah, that's their biggest problem right now. Alexander Frolov is also trying to do some work. He's not making quite as much progress as Dr.
Do you think we're doing the leading research right now?
I think I think the answer to that is yes. I believe the answer to that is yes. You look at some of the theoretical work that Kip Thorne is doing, Dr. Gott in the United States. This is wonderful work. But again, I'm not naive. There is work going on in other areas. In China, I don't know.
You do understand that what you're saying to tonight to many people out there, including me, by the way, is a complete blowaway. We had no idea that such experimentation was underway anywhere, much less here, much less Long Island.
Well, I think the interesting thing is that, you know, I think the hardest part is like I said earlier, sometimes we shrink all this magic in the world to the size of our daily routines, and you know we have a lot of cultural and biological evolution where we're conditioned that time is a certain thing. But what's interesting is these concepts. Like for instance, we were just talking before the last break about reversing time travel and the death of cause and effect. This is taught. This concept of space-time diagrams and closed time-like curves is now taught in college-level physics courses. Mm-hmm. And this is not, but what's interesting is because we don't see the effects of this apparent in our daily lives and we haven't been exposed to it, we don't accept it. We don't think about it. It doesn't mean it's not there.
This could eventually lead to real time travel. What do you imagine if real-time travel, Doctor, were to become possible, not just time control in the field that you've created, but real-time travel? What would be the rules attached to it? Would there be rules? In other words, if I were to travel back into time, would I be able to physically interact in that time in every normal way one can imagine, or would I be not fully in that time? I'm not even sure what I'm asking here.
No, that's fine. It's actually, believe it or not, it's one of the biggest philosophical questions around this type of research that's going on in a lot of different fields.
Because as we leave this time in your time warp field, we see a darker presence to a material object. So one would imagine as you move deeper into time travel, forward or reverse, that there would be shifts that would occur, the kind of shifts you're talking about in time manipulation or time control, that might virtually make you, I don't know, invisible or dysfunctional in another time.
Well, to answer your first question, I think a lot of people are familiar with the physicist Stephen Hawking. He, a number of years back, he published a paper called the Chronology Protection Conjecture, and it was exactly what it sounds like. He said that even if you could be able to go, it was physically impossible for time travel, and if you could go back in time, you could never change anything because somehow the universe will protect its timeline.
Yes.
Now, he since, that was early on in his career, he since repealed that, and he now stands with all the physicists of the world saying that time travel to the past does not violate the laws of physics and mathematics. But it is a question. Is there something that would protect you or prevent you from going back and altering a timeline? I think one of the things that a lot of people see as a first application is viewing through time versus travel through time.
Right.
The ability to go back and view events that happened in the past or events that might be in the future. And that's one way that some...
Yeah, I can imagine that would come before a physical transference.
And a lot of people bring that up, Art, because that's their way of addressing the issue that, if it's the issue of the butterfly's wing. What happens if you went back to the days of the dinosaur and you stepped on a butterfly? Well, that butterfly didn't flap its wings the next minute and create a breeze that created a storm, and the whole history of the Earth was
that's right,
destroyed.
Yes.
And by only having viewing capability, you could never interact. And therefore,
that seems very radical to me. I would think that Occam's razor would suggest that such a small occurrence would not have such a large effect.
Yes.
Wouldn't it? More quickly, in other words, that it would be sort of like a ripple that would dissipate and the current would continue as before?
It's possible. It's possible. I don't know the answer, but I've looked at it from both sides, and I go around in circles every time I get into the discussion, so it's a good point you're raising.
Well, when you activate this time warp field, and you're sitting there staring at an object getting darker, moving forward or reverse in time. No, wait a minute. You said darker only in one direction. Which was it?
Yeah. The object. It's when we accelerate the time rate inside the field, so the time rate is moving faster than outside of the field. We actually see a darkening of the object. But that's an optical effect. It's an optical effect of the change in the colors or the frequencies. As a matter of fact, it's very similar for your listeners. It's very similar to a radar gun that a policeman would use. He fires off a frequency, say it's 100 megahertz, hits your car, and when it comes back, it's 100 megahertz plus the speed of your car.
That's right.
And it's a Doppling. It's a Doppling effect. He's seeing a higher frequency, and he knows the difference. And that's exactly what happens. Colors are frequencies.
That machine measures the difference and reads out 70 miles an hour, 80 miles an hour,
yes,
whatever.
Yeah, so that's exactly what we're seeing. The Doppling effect in our boundary layer is really just, increasing or decreasing the frequencies of the colors of the object.
Yeah, I know. But when you're sitting there looking at that object, changing in that manner, you are sitting there watching time warp. I mean, what kind of experience psychologically is that? I suppose by now you're used to it, but the first time you saw something like that happen in your experimentation, you must have just been in awe.
I still am, Art. I still am. We have a very interesting setup. We have a mechanical, it's a mechanical clock that uses metal balls. It's a pure, very simplistic metal clock, but part of the mechanism of the clock are these balls that fly down a tray and then drop through the air into another part of the clock. And what we can actually see as we retard the time rate, reduce the time rate inside the field, you can see the balls falling slower. The impression, the effect on people who have seen it, and it's still on myself, is amazing. You cannot it's hard to walk down the street and look at the world other than just this amazing place and world of dynamic web of energy, and a place where space and time are things that we just are wonderful. It's anyway, I'm going off.
Would such travel into the past for a biological entity, were it possible, make that? Would the entity arrive in another time, still aging at the same linear rate with time moving at the same linear rate, or would that biological organism arrive in the past and be younger?
Well, first off, biologically speaking, like say for instance, as we retard time, or you look at the case of rotating cylinders or Tipler cylinders, in that case, the biological entity would be sent back into time, and they would remain at the same age, and they would age at a normal rate. The question becomes, if you send somebody back in time, you can send their biological. What about their spirituality? This is a question that gets asked me, and maybe your listeners have some answers because I don't. To send somebody back in time, what does that do to the spiritual aspects of one's mind and person and soul? We don't know the answer to that.
I sure don't either. I have no idea. I think that it would. It might challenge some closely held beliefs, mightn't it?
Yeah, it certainly does. What's interesting is this challenging of some of these closely held beliefs began as early as the 1960s. Like I said, you could pick up the phone and call any physicist, any Nobel Prize-winning physicist, and ask them about Tipler cylinders and general relativity and is reverse time travel possible without violating the laws of math and physics? They'll all tell you the same thing, yes. But we choose not to see it. It's absolutely amazing sometimes.
Well, one of the great theoretical physicists that I speak with is Dr. Michio Kaku.
Oh, wonderful individual.
Many times. I guess you may have heard of him.
Oh, of course. I think everybody knows his books, Hyperspace.
Yeah, sure.
He's done some wonderful work on
co-founder of the string theory.
Absolutely.
So on and on. So he has suggested that, yes, time travel, he believes, may be possible eventually, but the amount of power required.
Yeah, that was interesting. That was one of the points I brought up earlier on in our discussion, is the most exciting thing about our time warp field technology, and the most amazing thing to us is the fact that we've produced these results without the energy that's predicted. Like, for instance, a lot of people say the amount of energy required to tear time and space is something called the Planck's constant.
Yes.
In this case, that's the exciting thing. To a physicist, the exciting thing about our time warp field technology is that we've accomplished it with a significant lower level of power.
Here's a hardware question regarding the field that you have created. If the object, which you have said going forward or reverse, you would begin to see visual detectable changes in the spectrum, right?
That is correct.
Okay. If the object was actually in a slower time and it went back far enough or forward far enough, is it not probable that eventually it would simply disappear from the field?
I don't think so. I don't think so, because what we're seeing again is an optical phenomenon. It just means that it's again similar to the radar gun used by a policeman.
Yes,
that we're seeing an increase of the frequency when we, at the end of, say, we've had that object in the field and we've accelerated it at 300%, say for 2 or 3 hours. When we tune the field, when we modulate the field back down and remove the object is still the same color. It's still the same. There's no different in the material structure of the object or makeup.
But you've changed something in time. In other words,
certainly that object is now aged either more or less than the other objects around it.
But for that to have occurred, it had to actually be in a somewhat physically, it had to be in a different time as well, 2 places at once, or progressively in 2 places at once. I'm not sure of what I'm saying, but I'm closing my eyes and I'm imagining the process.
No, I understand. Sometimes
it all comes back to the nature of time, which we
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But if it were to disappear ultimately, then you've got the time travel machine kind of time travel.
That is correct. We have not seen any effect like that. I mean, we've been doing live experiments now for almost 3.5 years, and we haven't seen any phenomena of an object disappearing.
What would you conclude if you did?
If I did? Oh.
In other words, if at some advanced point with a smaller amount of power and a larger effect, an object disappeared, what would you conclude? What would you imagine had occurred to that object?
Oh, wow. We've given this some thought because, as I mentioned before, there are many. We have many questions. Sometimes in some areas we have more questions than answers. And matter of fact, you brought this up. One of the other areas that we have, where we have a big question, is we seem to be receiving power inside the time warp field that is not coming from us.
That cannot be accounted for.
Cannot be accounted for. When I say that, we know from our time warp field theory model and the basic models and laws of physics how much energy should be required to maintain our field. When we induce a field and create it, we pull the power back on the laser array to maintain it. However, the amount of energy we're inducing is not enough to maintain the field.
Achieve the effect.
Where's the energy coming from? We know it's there. We have sensor arrays. We can see what energy is active. Is it coming from, I'm being hypothetical now, is it coming from a parallel universe? Is it coming from hyperspace? Is it coming from maybe an effect of quantum gravitation that we don't understand?
This 0-point stuff that people talk about.
Yes, exactly. And we actually have a project called Project Prime Zero that's dedicated totally to trying to understand what we're seeing here. And that energy loss is one of our biggest unknowns right now today.
So then,
it's not a loss of energy, it's an unknown source of energy.
So then, if an object disappeared, you'd be sitting there not knowing whether it really had simply physically moved to another time or had essentially been dissembled, its molecules scattered to the wind.
Yeah, it's interesting. I realize I didn't answer your question.
That's why I brought it up again.
The answer is, I think more and more, I'm believing... I think I would give a lot of credibility to the idea of it moving into another universe. If I saw this, and again, hypothetically, I have not seen this yet. We have not seen this.
As opposed to another time, another universe, rather than another time, parallel universe.
Yes, because I believe time is really just more of an artificial creation. I think this notion of past, present, and future is, I think we'll find out. It'll become very self-evident that our understanding of what we label time isn't a very good understanding.